Alright, I am back with another video, and today we're doing a follow-up to a video that I made a long time ago now. Way back, made a duo build video for Link and Zelda from the Legend of Zelda series. One being a ranger, and one being a light cleric kind of ranger mix. It was a very fun build to kind of do, felt very true to the original characters, blah 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 blah. But ever since then, people have been asking me to follow up with the third piece of the Triforce, Ganondorf, the main villain of most of the games. And for the longest time, I put it off, and I don't know why. Well, actually, I do know why. I felt like I had a build that already pretty much perfectly encapsulated Ganondorf at the time, which I just always redirected people to, and that was my Dark Ronin build, and I just said slap a great sword on that, and you've pretty much got Ganondorf anyway. But people still keep asking me to do one, so I decided to finally look and sit down and see if I could make something slightly different than the Dark Ronin build, but still kind of getting the same sort of vibe, but like doing it in a different way that kind of better fits Ganondorf. Especially now that we have way more options available to us, like thanks to, mods being available on all platforms. So I'm happy to re-examine the build now and give it a good look. And I think what I've come up with here today is very, very fun. It's extremely powerful. For the first time probably ever on the channel, you're going to see two separate combat footage videos, one at the beginning, one at the end, because the first one that I took, I killed the enemy so quickly that I didn't think it was long enough, so I deliberately nerfed myself, and then brought, by bringing, like, weaker equipment, and then did it again, and I still won. So, yeah, this build is really, really strong, and that was kind of the vibe I was going for, the all-powerful Dark Lord, that lays waste to the land and can only be stopped by a hero wielding a legendary blade meant specifically for killing him. Because otherwise he's just immortal. But then there's also kind of the caveat of which Ganondorf is this based on, because there are many different iterations of Ganondorf throughout the series, and me personally, I'm most familiar with the Twilight Princess variant, as that was my main Zelda game that I played first, and like, it's the one I have the best memory of, and I did a bit of research here. I mean, I played Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess as a kid, so I took inspiration mostly from both of them. Not so much the Wind Waker version, but there is like a dual wielder build here that's very easy to just quickly adjust for, if you want to go for that, as well as the fact that you can also kind of make the Tears of the Kingdom variant, and I'll be discussing like a few other like pieces of equipment that you could bring to like kind of capture those different versions of Ganondorf, but the core build should mostly be the same. And again, I tried to capture like Ganondorf's abilities across multiple iterations, but on it, this is kind of just like a Ganondorf inspired build. I'm not necessarily focusing specifically on one very specific version of him, just kind of getting a general vibe for the character. So, without further ado, let's get into the build. We're going to be kicking things off as a fighter. This is for a few reasons. Number one, we need the armor proficiencies. This is a heavy armor build, because I wanted it to be, because, I mean, it's Ganondorf, come on. And I didn't really want to have to invest in dexterity, so heavy armor was the way to go. So we need to get heavy armor proficiency from somewhere, and fighter is the best way to do it. We're going to be taking fighter levels later on into the build anyway, so it makes sense to just pick up this first level of it here to also get concentration saving throw proficiency through con save proficiency, which is also going to be important for this build. It also gives us access to all simple and martial weapons, which is really going to help us out in the early game. And it's also going to give us second wind, which in my opinion is going to be great. Ganondorf is durable, able to heal from from wounds that would kill pretty much anyone else. I mean, again, those of you who have played Twilight Princess would know, he can only really be killed by the Master Sword, right? So I wanted to make him durable. I wanted to make him feel tanky. And second wind helps with that, giving us a bonus action heal equal to 1d10 plus our total fighter level. It's going to be a pretty decent amount of healing by the time we're all said and done, and we're actually going to have multiple methods of healing ourselves by the time this build is finished. So it's not going to just feel like a kind of one and done type thing. This is going to be pretty consistent throughout the build. Next up, for our race, I mean, Ganondorf is a Gerudo. We obviously don't have that in Baldur's Gate 3, however, Gerudos, at least in Ganondorf's case, are very tall, powerful green people. So we're playing a half-orc today. Half-orc is going to get us a bunch of really cool things here at level 1. We're going to get dark vision, which is always nice to have. We're going to get relentless endurance, meaning that if we reach 0 hit points, we regain 1 hit point instead of becoming downed. Again, that's going to kind of help out with us being able to be tanky and stay alive. Really, really nice. And also savage attacks. Whenever we land a critical hit with a melee weapon attack, we deal an extra die of weapon damage. That is really, really nice, as crits are going to be something that we're going to be able to hit somewhat consistently on this build because of the sheer amount of times we're going to be attacking in the turn. So I think half-orc is perfect for this build regardless, and the fact that it makes us look kind of lets us make a semi-convincing looking Ganondorf. I mean, if the fangs weren't there, I think it would be pretty good. Otherwise, I think I did the best job I could with the overall look. I really like the way the armor looks. It feels amazing. Obviously, for our fighting style, I have decided to go with a greatsword here. Now, Ganondorf has a lot of different fighting styles. Wind Waker, he has 2-weapon fighting, so if you wanted to go over a 2-weapon fighting style with this build, you could. In Tears of the Kingdom, he has a katana, and he's kind of like almost like this Ronin-esque character. So you could go with dueling and maybe like a shield or something if you wanted to go like sword and board with like the katana, or great weapon fighting as well if you want to two-hand it, which I suspect most people would. But I'm going to be kind of playing on the great sword variant with a little bit of the kind of, you know, Wizard King variant that he got kind of in Ocarina of Time. But I really like the idea of him having kind of like the great sword that he used in Twilight Princess to an extent, you know, the Six Sages sword, which he literally ripped from his chest after people tried to kill him with it, and then just proceeded to kill all of them. Like, honestly, this dude is hardcore as fuck, so so we're going to be going with great weapon fighting here to get a bit of extra damage on our two-handed attacks. As for our ability scores, this is going to look a bit weird to start, but it will make sense. Strength is at a 14. I would say maybe start with this at a 16 and respec swapping your charisma and strength later. Dexterity is at 10. Like I was saying, we don't need it necessarily, but I like keeping it at 10 so our initiative isn't completely abysmal and our dex saving throws aren't, again, completely abysmal, but 10 is obviously not great in most cases for that, but for us it's fine. Our AC is coming from our armor. Constitution is at 16. I want a decent chunk of HP and good con saving throws, and 16 is a good kind of middle ground to go with. Intelligence is at 8. We don't need it, but Ganondorf is a very, very smart and cunning individual. I don't like having intelligence this low canonically, so feel free to throw the warp headband of intellect on this build in order to kind of get that up. Wisdom is going to be at 10, just again so our wisdom saving throws aren't abysmal, but feel free to put those points somewhere else. And charisma is at 16 because we're going to need it later for our spellcasting. Next up, for our skill proficiencies, we have the Haunted One background because yes, we are playing a Dark Urge here. Dark Urge is going to get us access to the eventual Slayer form, which obviously can kind of be our Dark King Ganon transformation, because obviously Ganondorf isn't his actual form. He can transform into the big, you know, pig form that he's known for, which also has like the 2-weapon fighting style in things like Ocarina of Time. So if you want to kind of go with that as kind of like a backup, you absolutely can, but of course the Dark Urge just lets you play a truly evil character, which Ganondorf is. So I feel like Dark Urge Evil Run makes the most sense. Get that Slayer form for your Ganon transformation. But if you're not too keen on using Slayer for that, I do have a slightly alternate method of making that work, which might also fit the bill. But, of course, being the Haunted One gives us medicine and intimidation, as well as being able to go for insight and perception with our fighter skill proficiencies. Feel free to change these up however you like. There's nothing here that I would say is overall necessary for this build. You might find that athletics is a bit more important. Go for whatever you feel is right. Next up, we're going to be multiclassing immediately. And some of you may have seen this one coming, but yes, we are going to be multiclassing into Warlock. Now, you may be thinking, why Warlock? Well, first off, in Smash Bros, he has a move called Warlock Punch, so obviously that's the reason we take it. But in all seriousness, when you actually look at the backstory of the Zelda characters, like, I mean, obviously they all gain their power from, like, the Triforce, and specifically Ganondorf gets his power from being the reincarnation of Demise's hatred. For those of you who have played Skyward Sword, you'll know what I'm talking about. He's literally gaining power from his ancient ancestor being so fucking pissed at Link that he wants to kill him in every possible timeline, in every possible reincarnation. So I do think it makes sense for him to be a warlock, inheriting his powers from a literal godlike being from a long, long time ago. His lingering will still, you know, living on within Ganondorf. And so I do think that's kind of cool, but I also want to kind of look at it from the angle of the Triforce also giving him power, literally, the Triforce of power, because that's kind of divine in nature, but it's not really something he like actively prays to or something like that, a bit like with the cleric thing for Zelda. Zelda was a cleric because she actually prays to the goddess Hylia, and Link was a ranger because you know, that just makes sense. But a bard would also work, just in case you wanted to give that another go. But I did kind of think, like, okay, so I'm going Warlock, but, and hear me out on this, for the subclass, we have the Celestial subclass mod, which is available to all platforms. Whether you use the slightly more gamified version, or you want to use the version that's a bit more faithful to the 5e rules, there's two versions of the mod. I'm using the slightly more gamified version here because it's a bit closer to BG3's kind of sensibilities, but we're going to be playing the Celestial Warlock. Because again, because the Triforce is a kind of divine creation, it kind of makes sense to get somewhat divine abilities from Celestial. It's going to give us a lot of things that fit the kind of thing we're going for with Ganondorf here. So, I mean, if you don't agree, that's fine. Fiend or Great Old One would still work just as well, but I actually do think Celestial Warlock fits the bill for most, so we're going to use that here today. First up, with Celestial Warlock, we're going to gain access to 2 cantrips. Now, obviously, Eldritch Blast is here, but I mean, we don't ever really see Ganon do anything similar to Eldritch Blast. We will get his, like, lightning ball that he kind of uses in Ocarina of Time, but I don't think Eldritch Blast fits the bill here. So I'm going to be picking up the 2 kind of sword cantrips to kind of give us like a better sort of like basic attack once per turn, which is Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade. I said Green Flame Blade, thank you. So Booming Blade is going to allow us to deal extra thunder damage on a hit. It starts at 0, but as you level up, it'll become more damage with your character level. But the main thing is that if they move after being hit by Booming Blade, they're going to take additional damage. So it's additional damage on the initial strike, and then more damage if they move. Green Flame Blade is somewhat similar, as it will deal bonus fire damage on hit. Again, it's 0 at the moment, but will become more as we level up, but the fire will spread to adjacent enemies. So with these 2 abilities together, you're going to have pretty potent sword attacks. You can only use them once per turn, as they do cost an action to use, but they do trigger extra attack, so you'll be able to use these as your first attack in the turn, and then use your other abilities for the rest of your attacks. So overall, it's just a nice thing to have. This build is going to have some maneuverability, because Ganondorf has teleportation abilities, so I did pick those up here, so you can Booming Blade, teleport, off you go. Of course, with the Celestial, we're going to gain access to a few things, like our new kind of Healing Light feature. As a bonus action, you can heal 1 creature you can see within 60 feet of you for 1d6 plus your Charisma modifier. This can include us, so this is another bonus action heal. In addition to Second Wind, we're going to have a lot of ways to heal without using our main action, which is going to feel really, really nice to do. As for our spells, we're going to be picking up 2 that we get from Celestial. We're going to be grabbing Guiding Bolt here. This is kind of my stand-in for the electric, like, ball of light that Ganon uses in Ocarina of Time. It deals 46 radiant damage, which is pretty solid in the early game, and the next attack roll against that target will have advantage. The target with this spell hits, which is going to be pretty important because, yes, I'm using Great Weapon Master here. Overall, and it's going to scale up nicely with the Warlock spell slots. This gets really high, it gets a lot of power at higher levels. So overall, I just think it fits the build really, really nicely, kind of getting one of his most iconic attacks from Ocarina of Time. Next up, we're also going to be grabbing Cure Wounds. Now, yes, this one does cost our action, but it is another bit of healing in a pinch if we need it. Again, automatically scaling with Warlock spell slots, it works out really nice. But other things like Hex, Armour of Agathis, Hellish Rebuke, all the usual picks do work out as well, so feel free to sub that up for something else, but come on, we might as well use the new toys we're given. Next up, at Warlock level 2, we're going to gain access to another spell. I do like having Hellish Rebuke on this build, but if you want to change it, go ahead. We also get to pick up some Eldritch Invocations. I would say because we didn't really get any of the social stuff with the fact that we started as a fighter, let's grab Beguiling Influence. Again, Ganondorf is a deceiver. In both Tears of the Kingdom and Ocarina of Time, he was basically able to infiltrate, like the royal family, gain their trust, and then eventually betray them. So I feel like getting Beguiling Influence here for proficiency in Deception and Persuasion does make sense. He is actually a very charismatic individual. Also, we're going to be grabbing Devil's Sight here. Even though I don't really use the Darkness Devil's Sight combo in this build, Devil's Sight is just an extremely useful passive to have anyway. Basically making you immune to magical darkness can come up a lot, and it's really worth keeping around, especially when you want to be hitting those big sword attacks. Next up, at Warlock level 3, we're going to gain access to our Pact Boon and level 2 spells. With my level 2 spell selection, I'm going to be going with Misty Step. Misty Step is going to allow you to teleport as a bonus action, which again, Ganondorf does have teleportation abilities in a few of the games, so it does kind of make sense to bring this up here. And again, as a mostly melee build, it's really, really nice to just be able to move across the battlefield as needed, and again, this synergizes nicely with Booming Blade. I know it's a little bit like, but we only have 2 Warlock spell slots. And yeah, I do get that, but you never know when a Misty Step is going to be useful. But if you're desperate for it and don't want to take it as a Warlock spell, you can just grab it from pieces of equipment like the Amulet of Misty Step or the, what's it called? The Disintegrating Nightwalkers. So with that would allow you to get a lot of Misty Steps per short rest if you really want to go down the teleportation route. But otherwise, just picking it up here for like fringe emergency cases does make sense. And next up for our Pact Boon, let's not even beat around the bush, we're going with Pact of the Blade. It is the best thing for this build. We're going to get Bind Pact Weapon, allowing us to use our Charisma for the attack and damage rolls of our weapon and automatically become proficient with it, and it cannot be disarmed while we wield it. So overall, it's just too good, and later on it's going to get us extra attack, which we do want on this build. Next up, we do get to choose another level 2 spell, and at this point, it's a pick your favourite type situation. If you want to do Darkness Devil's Sight, you absolutely can. If you kind of want to lean into the fact that Ganondorf can kind of create clones of himself, you know, like Phantom Ganon and such exists, you could go with Mirror Image to give yourself some more AC. There is Hold Person if you just want to decide that somebody's going to die today. There's things like Thunder, Ray of Enfeeblement, Charm Person if you want to lean more into the deception angle. Hex, again, always a good pick. Really up to you what you want to choose here, it doesn't matter. And then obviously we do get to pick a feat at this level. It's entirely up to you what you want to choose here. I would say an ability score improvement is great here, and just bumping up that charisma to make everything that we do better. It does just make the most sense, but we'll be able to pick up some of the more fun feats in a little while. At Warlock level 5, we're going to gain access to level 3 spells, as well as our Deepened Pact feature, giving us extra attack with our Pact weapon. And because this extra attack works slightly differently on difficulties Tactician and lower, which is what all my builds are kind of built for, this won't work on Honor mode unfortunately, this version of extra attack stacks with the regular extra attack you gain from martial classes like Fighter. So you can actually make an additional attack per turn, so you get to make 3 attacks with a single action, which is really, really nice. That's the same as level 11 Fighter, which technically you can get a 1 level earlier with a multi-class into a martial class, so overall it's really good. Next up, we do get to pick another Eldritch Invocation, and it's entirely up to you what you want to pick here. It really doesn't matter. I kind of took Beast Speech in my testing because, I don't know, it's a great roleplay feature to have, being able to cast Speak with Animals, and I feel like because Ganon does turn into, like, the boar form in, like, Twilight Princess and such like that, I mean, you can kind of make that work. This build's not a druid, so, I mean, if you don't want to go with this, you can pick something else, it really doesn't matter, but I just picked it up because I thought, you know what, I like having this on any builds, I can get it on. Now, you have a choice here. You don't actually have to go to Warlock level 6, but in my testing I did, because I found it to work out quite nicely. We get the subclass feature, Radiant Soul. Your link to the Celestial allows you to serve as a conduit for radiant energy. You gain resistance to radiant damage, so any Link who tries to hit you with a Master Sword Charge Beam is going to have a bit of a hard time, and you add your Charisma modifier to spells that deal radiant or fire damage, so our Guiding Bolt just got even stronger. Overall, I kind of like the resistance to radiant damage thematically, but maybe you find that, well, actually the Master Sword is supposed to be the thing that beats him, so perhaps he shouldn't have resistance to it. But, you know, I like Radiant Soul here, it feels fun to use, so I'm going to go with it here. Next up for our spells, we do get to pick a level 3 spell option here, and it's entirely up to you what you want to pick, it really doesn't matter. I went with Grant Flight to give us the ability to fly, because Ganon does do that. However, I am going to recommend that for this build, you should probably be picking up the Psionic Powers, so that when you get to Act 3, you can pick up the Psionic Power to just let you fly anyway, making this kind of pointless, yes, but you can retrain it out with a respec if you want. But if you don't want to go down the Psionic Powers route, then Grant Flight will work just fine. Now, at this point, we are done with Warlock. You could technically go to level 7 if you wanted to, but you'd be missing out on a feat if you did. But you do get level 4 spells and level 4 Warlock spell slots, which are quite nice. And you can even pick up Guardian of Faith if you really want to summon Fat Phantom Ganon to your side, and an extra Eldritch Invocation. But I am going back to Fighter, because going back to Fighter is going to give us Action Surge, giving us another action. So when all is said and done, we'll be able to make 6 attacks in a turn if we have all 3 attacks from Extra Attack and Deep Impact and Action Surge. So, you know, it's going to be a big one. Next up, at level 3 of Fighter, we get to choose our subclass, and I would say you have 2 options here. The one I'm going to be going for with this build, and the one that I use in my testing, is Battle Master. Because again, Ganondorf is a master of the blade, and I wanted us to have a lot of different ways of attacking with our main weapon. His one-on-one sword duels with Link are pretty goddamn legendary. The Twilight Princess final boss still sits in my mind as being one of the coolest things they've ever done in the series. Unless you used a fishing rod, but we're not going to talk about that. But Battlemaster does work out really nicely here. It's going to give us the battlefield maneuvers, as well as the fact that this is allowing me to make a proper Warlock fighter build, which apparently I've never really done properly. I never made like a proper Battlemaster fighter Warlock, so I really wanted to do that here. However, I would not say no to Eldritch Knight. Eldritch Knight is going to give you spell slots to cast your Warlock spells at a lower level, but not having to use those higher level spell slots right away, as well as giving you really useful utility spells like Shield. So I would say there is definitely some value there. You can also get some extra utility cantrips like Friends, for example. But yeah, you can pick up things like Shield and maybe even absorb elements to become even more tanky. So I would say it's up to you really if you find like you want to cast your Warlock spells with regular spell slots too, because that would be kind of nice. And you do get to pick up something from the expanded spell list. You got a lot of stuff to work with here that can be really, really fun to work with. Otherwise, I would say I'm going to go with what I tested with and go with Battle Master, because Battle Master is going to give us some kind of fun things, namely Disarming Attack, which is going to be a fun little reference to the fact that, believe it or not, Ganon can kind of disarm the Master Sword off of Link quite a few times. I know he definitely does it in Ocarina of Time, but I'm pretty damn sure he's done it a few more times throughout the series history as well. So I think it's kind of funny that this is a thing that we could do now. We could just say, oh, you got the Master Sword, the thing that's meant to kill me? How about no? And just knock it on the floor. And then we've also got a few other things that I want to get, namely Fainting Attack. Fainting Attack is going to allow us to spend both our action and our bonus action on a turn to attack a target with advantage, again, going to help with Great Weapon Master in a minute, and deal an additional 1d8 damage. That's a potential 18 extra damage if we manage to hit the max, so that's pretty goddamn powerful. And finally, I want to grab Riposte, meaning that if our enemy misses us, we can spend a reaction and a superiority die to immediately counterattack with an additional d8 of damage. There's a lot of boss fights in the series where if Link misses his opportunity to strike or tries to attack when Ganondorf isn't open, he will just immediately counterattack and deal a lot of damage, so I feel like having Riposte here does make sense. At level 4, we're going to get our another feat, and I would say at this point, grab that Great Weapon Master. This is going to allow you to gain a +10 bonus to all damage done with our main weapon, but at the cost of a -5 attack roll penalty. This is why we have so many different sources of advantage to help us get over that penalty. Also, whenever we land a critical hit or kill a target with a melee weapon attack, we can make another melee weapon attack that turn as a bonus action. So overall, it's more damage and it's more potential attacks. So it's one of the best feats in the game. Hell, it might be the best feat in the game. I don't know. We'll have to give that a vote at some point. Next up, we get extra attack at total level 11, so now we get that third extra attack that fighters would normally get. And finally, at level 6, we are going to get our bonus fighter feat. Now, it's entirely up to you what you want to pick here. You can level up your constitution, you can max out your charisma, you could go for something like dual wielder if you want to go with the dual wielding playstyle instead of Great Weapon Master. You can kind of swap that around. There's some other things here. You could go for mobile if you want some more movement speed. There's things like Savage Attacker if you want to deal even more damage, Tough if you want to be even tankier, there's things like Eldritch Adept if you want another Eldritch Invocation, there's Fighting Initiate if you want another fighting style, and in fact you can even kind of mess around with the stats a little bit in this build if you want to use things like Telekinetic, Telepathic, or Shadow Touched, or Fey Touched to kind of get some more spells, but I'm going to be going with what I used for my testing, and that is Martial Adept. Martial Adept is going to give us an additional superiority die to fuel our Battle Master maneuvers, which is great. This means we'll have a total of 5 instead of 4. We also get to pick 2 more maneuvers, and really, it's entirely up to you what you want to pick here. I like menacing attack because we are the Demon King, we are the Lord of Darkness, we strike fear into the hearts of everyone we come across, so being able to deal an additional 1d8 of damage and possibly frighten a target, causing it so that they cannot move, and also have disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls, is really nice. The final one could be whatever you like though. There's goading attack, which makes it so that the target has disadvantage on attacking any other creature than you. There's maneuvering attack, allowing you to move your allies around. Maybe not do that one, that doesn't really fit the build. Pushing attack to be able to knock enemies away. Ganondorf's swings are usually powerful enough to knock Link back, so this does make sense. There's also trip attack, which is just one of the best in the game, allowing you to just knock an enemy prone, giving guaranteed advantage on follow-up attacks from both you and your party. And there's also sweeping attack, which would let you hit multiple enemies at once. I think I'm going to go with trip attack because it is usually the best option, especially in one-on-one fights or where you're up against the boss that can be knocked prone and your whole team can just absolutely dunk on them. So it's entirely up to you what you want to pick here, but I like trip attack personally. And that is the build. Overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is an absolute powerhouse. 3 attacks per turn, 6 with action surge. You're going to be able to do bonus action healing or even using cure wounds to keep up your HP to make you extremely durable. And pretty much every single attack you do can have extra damage added to it. Great Weapon Master synergizes greatly with things like Booming Blade to deal absolutely massive amounts of damage, or the Battle Master maneuvers to do absolutely massive amounts of damage. It's insane. You're tanky, you're strong, you do it all quite well. And you even have maneuverability options like being able to fly or being able to use Misty Step to teleport. And again, it's all based on one stat, that being our charisma, meaning that we're able to really make use of being a single ability score dependent character, which is just lovely. Now, you may think this build is a bit basic, and like I said, for the longest time, I felt that my old Dark Ronin build worked perfectly, which was a I believe it was a Pact of the Fiend. No, it was either a Pact of the Fiend or a Pact of the Great Old One Warlock that also had Paladin Oathbreaker levels, which allows you to use like Aura of Hate and such like that, and like raise your undead demon army and such like that, because I thought that would be perfect for Ganondorf, but people wanted me to show like an alternate take on it, so here we are. And now with that, I think like we got everything that covers Ganondorf. We even get like his little lightning ball attack. Well, it's not lightning, it's radiant damage. We get that ball of light attack that he uses in Ocarina of Time. I mean, come on, as long as your enemy doesn't have a bottle, you're perfectly fine. But anyways, without further ado, let's get into the equipment. So let's start off with our choices of weapons. I think our main weapon for the end game should be Baldurin's Giant Slayer. Yes, it's the pretty typical option for power building a strength-based character, but hey, I think it works here. Basically, what this is going to allow us to do is, on a hit, we double the damage from our strength modifier. This is why our strength is at 14, just to give us that little bit of extra damage. This weapon grants you advantage on attack rolls against large, huge, or gargantuan creatures. It's a +3 weapon, meaning that we really help to offset the penalty from Great Weapon Master, but it also comes with a couple of unique things, namely, topple the big folk, meaning that if we deal additional damage equal to our proficiency bonus on a hit, and if we hit a large, huge, or gargantuan creature, they take an additional 2 to 12 slashing damage and must succeed a strength save or fall prone, which again, falling prone, very, very nice. But it's also going to give us giant form, grow to a fearsome size. Your weapons will deal an additional 1d6 damage, and you gain 27 temporary hit points, and gain advantage on strength checks and saving throws. This is our phase 2. Link has done a bit too much damage to us. This is where we grow big and go nasty. We get a bit more tankiness, we get a bit more damage, and we gain advantage on being knocked down. Like, I think it's just great. I think it works perfectly for this build, as kind of making it like the boss battle build thing that I've kind of done a bunch of times. So overall, I think it works pretty nicely here. And the idea of taking the Baldurin's Giant Slayer, which is an ancient hero sword that's been corrupted by, like, you know, dark powers, I mean, I think that makes sense for Ganondorf. That does kind of remind me of, like, the Sword of the Six Sages that he uses in Twilight Princess. It's a sword that was meant for good, but he twisted and turned into, like, his evil machinations. So, I think the Baldurin's Giant Slayer is perfect for this build. It makes you feel powerful, it gets you abilities that are adjacent to Ganon, again, growing big, you know, kind of like the pig form of Ganon and such like that. I think it just works. However, we do have other weapon options. Like I say, you can grab the katana if you want to play a more Tears of the Kingdom inspired build, but I think you're going to want maybe a Warlock Monk for that instead, if you're going to do that, because it would kind of help with the being able to use dexterity for your weapon attacks and such like that, as well as the fact that you'd be able to wear clothing instead of heavy armor, since you then could go and do like his actual like Ronin style robes that he had in that game. There's also, for the early game, we have Svartalby's Woundseeker as just a solid early game greatsword, which will give an additional 1d4 bonus to attack rolls with this weapon when attacking creatures that have already taken damage. So if they're not at full health, you're going to get a greater chance to hit, which is awesome. But another alternate weapon would be the Null Runa, because again, one of Ganon's iconic weapons from the very, very old days is a trident when he's in his Pig Ganon form. So if you wanted to kind of like use this as like that, you could. It's a weapon that will return to your hand when thrown, you cannot be forced to drop it, and when thrown, the weapon explodes, dealing extra thunder damage, and it gains extra thunder damage on hits. Anyway, you also gain a couple of unique attacks like, I believe this is, Zephyr Flash and Zephyr Break, so getting you some unique kind of powerful feeling attacks, and you also gain a bonus to movement speed and jump distance and immunity to falling damage. It's also a +3 weapon. I'd definitely say this is the biggest contender for the slot over Baldur's Giant Slayer, but I do feel like Baldur's Giant Slayer is just better for the build overall in terms of the theme. But yeah, you have a few options for weapons here depending on what kind of Ganon you want to make, but I definitely think that the Giant Slayer is the best way to go. But for our ranged weapon slot, we don't need anything here since Ganondorf doesn't really use a bow, but I do like to throw the Darkfire short bow in here to give us resistance to fire and cold damage, two very common damage types to resist, as well as giving us access to haste. With the amount of attacks we can do in a turn normally, we could get like 6 attacks per turn regularly as long as we're able to maintain concentration, and if we action surge on top of that, well, I mean, you do the math. We gain a bonus to our armor class and gain more movement speed. It is just so good for this build if we're not really focusing on concentrating on anything else, so it just helps out immensely. But let's get into the equipment. First up, I've gone for Savarok's Horned Helmet. This is going to give us dark vision up to a range of 3 meters or 50 meters if we already had it. Completely irrelevant to us because we took Devil Sight. However, the number we need to roll when making a critical hit is reduced by 1. This effect can stack. You also cannot be frightened and cannot be afflicted with other emotion-altering conditions, and it gives us a small bonus to con saves, which helps our concentration. I like this because it's like, when you actually equip it, it kind of reminds me of Phantom Ganon's helmet, and it just feels very, very, very cool, and it fits the rest of the look so well. So if you wanted to throw a helmet on this build, I mean, this just looks badass, so I like this here. But a decent early game option would be the Diadem of Arcane Synergy. Whenever you inflict a condition, which we can do things like Frightened with our various abilities, we gain Arcane Synergy for 2 turns. Arcane Synergy will allow us to deal additional damage to the enemy equal to our spellcasting ability modifier. Since our charisma is high, this works out greatly for us, so that's a decent early game option. Because we're playing a Dark Urge, we get the Deathstalker Mantle. Ganondorf is always known to kind of wear a red cape, at least in most of his appearances, so I wanted a red cape here, and the Deathstalker Mantle is a red cape. But since we're playing a Dark Urge with this build, we're going to get this automatically anyway, and it's just a great ability, allowing us to become invisible for 2 turns. In a lot of Zelda boss fights, the boss will like disappear for a second after you deal damage to kind of let the fight reset, and Deathstalker Mantle kind of lets you do that, but when you kill, because you're gonna do a lot of killing. And it's another source of advantage, which is great for a Great Weapon Master. Next up, our armor of choice is the Adamantine Splint Armor. I really liked how close this looks to the original kind of Ganondorf armor. It kind of looks like a weird kind of mishmash of some of the armors he's worn across the series, and it comes with some amazing abilities for us. All incoming damage is reduced by 2. Again, we're even tankier. And when a melee attack hits us, the attacker is sent reeling for 3 turns. Reeling gives them a penalty to attack rolls equal to the number of turns remaining, so for hitting us, they get a -3 penalty to any remaining attacks. However, those kind of go away. I think it's like once each time they actually manage to land an attack, but just getting punished for hitting us and we get to tank a ton of damage feels great. And attacks cannot land critical hits against us. That is huge for survivability. It only comes with a base 18 armor class, but you can boost that up with other equipment like the Cloak of Protection or the Evasive Boots as well, or even a shield if you do decide to use a shield on this build. If you go down the Katana route, you can get your AC a bit higher, but honestly, 18 is all we really need. For my gloves here, we've got the Legacy of the Masters, giving us a +2 bonus to attack and damage rolls with weapons. It's more damage and a higher chance to hit with Great Weapon Master. This is a free slot, put whatever you think feels right in this slot, but this is just a generically good piece of kit for the build. We're also going to have some early game options for gloves as well. The Gloves of the Automaton would be another way of gaining advantage on all of your attacks, allowing you to enter a powered up state, so again, another kind of like second phase thing you can do, giving you advantage on all your attack rolls and having resistance to lightning damage, giving us a total of 4 resistances, making us, again, very, very tanky. My only caveat to this, obviously, is you have to actually do an inherently good thing in order to get these. So, I don't know if Ganondorf would save the dude on the windmill in order to get these later on, but if you feel like he's going to use his shrewd, like, conniving kind of scheming that he does kind of in the early stages of his plans to maybe make up that friendship to get the good equipment that he can use to kind of, I don't know, defeat the Hyrule royal family later, then yeah, grab the Gloves of the Automaton. But then you also have the option to go for the Gloves of Missile Snaring, which I actually feel like does fit on theme for the build. This allows you to intercept ranged weapon attacks, reducing their damage by 1d10 plus your dex modifier. Obviously, we don't have a dex modifier, so it's just going to be a flat 1d10 for us, which is why I recommend swapping off of this later. But in a lot of the Zelda games, if you just try and shoot Ganon from a distance with the hero's bow or whatever, it's not going to work. He just deflects it away. So it actually does fit the theme. Again, if you want to play the monk variant of this build using the katana for Tears of the Kingdom, you're going to get deflect missiles from a monk anyway, which again makes a lot of sense. So overall, I like this as an early game option because I do think it fits the theme, but you can also try and pick up the Gloves of the Automaton as well once you hit Act 2 if you decide to follow that questline. And finally, for the boots here, I decided to go with the Boots of Persistence. Again, a very generic choice, giving us freedom of movement along Strider, giving us more movement speed, and the ability to stop difficult terrain, and like being ensnared, and yada yada yada. Basically, we could just become like, we cannot be stopped, we cannot be trapped, which I love. I think it's great for this build, and it does help with dex saving throws a little bit as well. But if you want something that's also generically useful, you can go for the Evasive Shoes, or the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, again, if you want more Misty Step. Now, it seems I forgot to put the Amulet on this build. Whoops, this must be a save file where I didn't have it on, but I do recommend the Amulet of Misty Step for this slot to give you another teleport. Now, moving on, we also have the After Death Do Us Part ring. Anytime I do these tanky boss battle type builds, I do like to throw on this ring. Whenever the wearer is downed, they rise once more with half of their hit points, but are gripped by Shadow Possession. Shadow Possession part is bugged, doesn't actually happen, but I hope this gets fixed in patch 8 because I actually want this for flavor and lore reasons. Basically what this is going to do for us though is just let us get back up with half our HP, meaning that we can use any transformations or power-ups that we have to immediately go into our phase 2 once our HP bar reaches 0, which I quite like. I've also thrown the Killer's Sweetheart on this build. Whenever you kill a creature, your next attack roll is guaranteed to be a critical hit. You can use this effect once per long rest. Now, it says your next attack roll will be a critical hit, but that's not actually true. It's a reaction that you can bank and spend whenever you like. So basically, just for killing an enemy, you gain a critical hit to use sometime in the future. Combine this with the Psionic Power, which is the Luck of the Far Realms, and you get 2 of these. And again, our crits on this build are going to be goddamn powerful. This is like our big final boss attack, so quite happy to have this here. So this, no camp clothing for this build, but this is coloured in the Dark Urge dye, fittingly enough, from the Faerunian Colours mod to get the look that we have going here. And that is the build. Overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is a ton of awesome stuff. You're an absolute powerhouse, you're extremely tanky, like you're either going to end encounters like within seconds or tank so much damage that it's not even going to matter if the fight lasts longer anyway, and you just have so many options available to you. Movement, healing, various different special effects with the Battlemaster maneuvers, you even have battlefield control with things like Hold Person if you want to go down that route, and even have a powerful ranged attack in the form of Guiding Bolt, which again, just fits the theme. You have upwards of up to 4 resistances depending on your equipment. It's just so good. I really, really like the way this build turned out, but again, I do see the Warlock Paladin build as well, the Oathbreaker, or even the Oath of Vengeance. In fact, Oath of Vengeance would work really well, because obviously, you know, Demise swore vengeance against, you know, Hylia, Link, Zelda, so I think the Oath of Vengeance on Ganondorf does make sense there if you want to go for that Paladin Warlock route, the Padlock as it were. But yeah, I don't think there's really much else to say here. I think this build covers the whole idea of Ganondorf pretty well, so for all of you that were requesting it, especially that one guy who kept doing it, I hope this build satisfied everything. And again, it gave me a chance to make a proper Warlock fighter, which for some reason I haven't done. So yeah, that is the end of the video. I don't think there's anything more for me to say, so I will leave it here. Thank you all so much for watching, and goodbye.